Hello. Well, welcome to another Funky Friday at 5. I'm your host, Mitch Hampton, and that was an improvised. I decided to, if that's okay with everybody, sign on like 8 minutes early, I think. I'm saying hello to my producer, Laurie, and I'm waiting for a very special guest, actually, Persephone. And we are going to talk when she gets here about whatever comes to our mind spontaneously. And hopefully she will be here. So that piece of music, again, totally spontaneous, unplanned. And my idea was to start with the Funky Friday theme and slow it way down. Take 3 notes out of it, 3 pitches, notes, and think about the late Stephen Sondheim. and see what came out musically. And so that was a very unplanned, impromptu, imperfect tribute to Sondheim. Now, a lot of people are going to be talking about Sondheim, and rightfully so, forever. I mean, they're going to be talking actors, lyricists, producers, just fans, people that were touched and moved by him. Now, that's all I can do is just this little piece of music here. I mean, I guess I could do other things, but that's all I can come up with. So I don't know. And I wanted to start with that as we wait for Stephanie. I hear something. There you are. Hey, Stephanie.
Hi. I didn't even realize this had video until like 15 minutes ago, and I was like,
oh. Would you prefer it only be audio? I mean, it's the whole. What do you think? What do you?
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
I just had no idea. Because we did the phone last time.
You know, I've been on for 10 minutes, and I played a whole musical composition before you got here.
Oh wow.
So I was trying to entertain people because I was very moved. Well, a lot of us are moved about Stephen Sondheim, and so I you know, Stephen Sondheim's passing, right? And so I performed a composition inspired by the memory of him, you know, and so that's what I did.
Oh, that's nice.
And then you now you showed up, so.
Yes, I'm here. I think I'm a couple minutes late, but I made it.
You made it. So how should I introduce you? This is a Funky Friday at 5. You're a guest, Stephanie Persephone, correct?
Yeah.
And I thought we would do what I would call a freewheeling show, and not try to plan too much and just see what comes up.
Sounds good.
Along the subject of artistry and autism.
Yeah.
About which I think you have an enormous amount to say, I suspect, and you know, I'd like to hear you say it, whatever it is. And so where do you think we should begin on those subjects? They're big subjects, of course. And
I don't know. There's a lot. I mean, for me specifically on that subject, I was drawing before pretty much any other communication as a kid. I loved drawing. I would draw all the time during class, like in school, constantly. That's like all I would do. And I got very, very advanced for my age. And I remember in elementary school, like I was like known as like the artist or whatever. And when they would have like drawing contests, I'd always be the winner. That was like my thing.
Beautiful. So so I don't remember any of those contests. I guess it depends on where you went to school. I mean, I was
in elementary school, specifically in
you guys had drawing
a few different ones. I went to one in Manchester, New Hampshire as a kid. I think it was Manchester. Yeah, it was Manchester. I don't remember the name of it.
Right.
It was I lived in downtown Manchester, so whatever school is in that area.
Right.
And this was in the early 90s, like 92 2. So like,
Stephanie,
a long time ago.
I was in elementary school in 1971.
Yeah, you're the
That's a
same
big
age as my
difference.
mother.
For
Yeah.
different generations, the difference in 1991. What is that like in the 90s? It must be a whole different world, different era.
Yeah,
That's
the 90s was interesting. Yeah, but I think it was like second to I was there until about 4th or 5th grade, but every year during Halloween, they'd have like a witch drawing contest, and I had like this witch I would draw that I made up with this super long nose and everything.
yeah.
My mom has one of my drawings somewhere. She can't find it.
She's been looking
She
for
had it, and
Yeah.
she showed it to me, and then she put it somewhere. And it's like kind of the only existing one because all of my other stuff from when I was a kid got thrown away by people here and there.
Right.
But it's like the only one, and it's like of people in some kind of dance club, and they're all dressed like up in the Victorian era clothing.
Wow.
And I wrote on it age 10, so I was 10, and it's all like super realistic looking.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're all dressed in realistic clothing, and then there's a disco ball randomly.
Right.
I mean, in Victorian clothing with a disco ball. It's kind of a funny drawing I did, but I would draw like constantly. I would do. I remember I did. I think it was 3rd or 4th grade. One of the teachers or like teacher assistant ladies took me out of class to help paint a mural in the hallway, which was really cool. And remember, she told me.
Do you mind holding that thought? Because I really can't wrap my brain around the fact of so much drawing. Like I didn't draw, so I guess it's a function, I guess, of what school system you're in, right, or what town you're in.
Or if you're interested, you probably are more into music, it seems.
Oh yeah, that's all for me. It was music, music, music.
Yeah, I did a little bit of music. I did cello.
For me, it was like I was obsessing about seeing Jaws by Spielberg or seeing a French movie or something. So it was that.
Yeah.
I can't draw. As I've said this, I joked, and I can barely. I can't even make out any 3D bits. So I'm in awe of people like yourself that can look at something in the environment, like or a
I don't even draw that much anymore, but I still can do it. Like it's.
How do you folks do that? I don't know how that works. You just see
I don't know. It was just something I just did naturally, I guess.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just. It depends on. But I've noticed, whether or not you draw as your focus. I know a lot of artists that have this same kind of interest in like some sort of what do you call it? Like artistic or aesthetic.
Right. Visual
or even like for me, I have auditory interest too. Like I got really hyper into music, when I got a little bit older.
Yeah.
I would say when I was about 12, I started really getting into music, and I just would hyper fixate and find all these artists and music and just go deeper into like history of music and things and that my peers weren't doing. And so I would show them music and they'd be like, what is that? And I noticed that like among a lot of different autistic people that I know in some capacity. And I feel like a lot of the close friendships I've made throughout the years I have many different interests from like, from like history of clothing to history of music to art and stuff like that. But I've known, record collectors and music, audiophiles, and they're really deep into it as well, into the collecting that. And then people really deep into the interest of any sort of history. It's sort of like a part of having I would say it's very neurodivergent thing.
Right.
Even if they don't know they're neurodivergent, I'm like, these people have the same kind of thought patterns that I do. You know what I mean? It's to go deep into it's kind of like categorization and pattern seeking. I feel like it's seeking, because it's not just that I'm pattern oriented. I do seek like where things connect. So when I get into music, for example, I'm like, oh, well, this sounds like it's inspired by this
Mm-hmm.
And then this sound, and I'm just like, where did that start, or where, how does that sound alike? And I've DJ'd a few times in my life, and finding where like things sort of sound similar, or like have a
Mhm.
commonality, where like maybe just on like face value you wouldn't see that these things are
Right.
connected or
Mhm.
sound similar.
Yeah.
For me it would sound similar, like I would get the subtle similarity, I guess. It's hard to describe, but I feel
Yeah.
like it's a commonality of like neurodivergent people. We tend to have that
Yeah.
pattern seeking where we have an interest, and we follow like a thread of it,
It's a yeah.
um I notice, like neurotypicals that I know that have like an interest that may
Yeah.
overlap with mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe they have like an interest in like a specific artist or something
Right.
or whatever, but I don't notice a continuation of like, oh, there's this artist is inspired by this artist, or there's another similar artist to this
Yeah.
artist.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what they and the way they miss the most important thing.
Yeah.
Right. Because like I'm really into Stephen Sondheim, but like because of that, I've like read everything he's read. Or I was
Yeah.
interested in like what art he consumed in the 40s.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that's a
Yeah.
much deeper than just being in just knowing a few shows. It's not superficial. And
Exactly.
I also find that when you go really into the artists like that, you learn about a lot of topics outside of music. You'll learn about
Absolutely.
you'll learn about the history of New York or his family, and it's a whole. So there's a lot of richness there. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
it's like, yeah, it's like
When I was about, I want to say 14, 13, 14, I discovered PJ Harvey, and she was like my fixation as a
yeah,
teenager. And her music was very fascinating to me because it was just so different, and it was so real, and it had like her, just the way she expressed, I guess, she was just very real and very direct, and it was a lot different than anything I was hearing at the time. None of my peers were into her at all, but I got into her. But as a result of getting into her is how I kind of got into deeper into the history of music, because she talked about her influences, like Captain Beefheart, for example. And then I got into Captain Beefheart, and then I learned more about like similar music of that time in the
right,
60s.
right,
And then I would get deeper on and deeper on, and I started to get into stuff like Red Crayola, and as a teenager, just because I would jump off of that, and then I would learn about where she's from in Dorset, England, and
hmm,
learning about the songs she's written,
mhm,
and what they mean and what they're about, and her relationship in
right.
Nick Cave and her abortion and stuff like that.
Wow.
So you learn so much about the artist, but also the art itself, and where I as I got more into music, I started to hear in
Right.
her songs where she had almost, I wouldn't say it's not plagiarism, but she's sort of it's almost like she did homages to different artists and stuff. Even the Stooges, there
Right.
was a bass line, and even she would change the lyrics.
Mhm.
And when I was a kid, I didn't know the influences yet,
Yeah.
but it's almost like she brought me to all of these different artists way back, that influenced her, that influenced music in general. So I was
Right.
getting into really deep, different music as a young teenager then. And
Right.
this is like when the internet was very young, so there wasn't a lot of like access as there are now to like find,
Right.
there wasn't Spotify, there wasn't stuff like that.
Right.
You had to like
Yeah,
actually
to
like,
really seek it out, right? It's
you
like
had to seek
what
it.
for some people that work could be laborious, but to us it's joy.
Yeah, I would
Wonderful
just,
memories of you talk about PJ Harvey was into the Stooges. Is that similar to Patti Smith being into Bresson?
to
Robert
what?
Bresson, well, the filmmaker Robert Bresson, that
I
Patti
don't
Smith.
know. I never really got deep into Patti Smith myself. I know that a lot of people have, but I don't know. I never got deep into her. I feel like I got into PJ Harvey,
Right.
and then for a long time, for many years, I got really, really into, like, from, I wanna say, like, 1961 to 75,
Those are
like,
good years. Yeah.
yeah, like,
Great years. That's a lot there.
garage and beyond, like,
Yeah.
psychedelic and all of the experimentation
Yeah.
and all the stuff, like, a lot of the records that I've saved in my collection are
Yeah.
that. They're either that or they're, like, the electronic experimentations of that
Mhm.
time, and even pre that time, I have some, you know, Teresa Rapazzi and blanking on her name, uh, Delia Derbyshire, and there's another woman I have her record, and her name escapes me. I can see the record in my brain, but like
There's a
you're
whole
but I
universe.
don't know the name at the top of my head until probably
Yeah.
like a half an hour from now.
There's a
But
there's a
like
there's
stuff
a
like
whole
that,
whole
you know?
there's a whole universe there that I'm, you're so knowledgeable about. Like I'm ignorant about it because it's like you can't know everything, right? So I think sometimes if you're really into something, you're not into something else, you miss it, right? So that's just what I'm saying. I don't know
Exactly,
some of
like,
the names,
there's
but
so
yeah,
much, you know? And then I would just open up the bo especially in that era, it's just like you go deep into it and you go deep and
yeah,
deep and deep. So, like, I spent a lot of time there, and then it wasn't until recently I started to catch up to, like, the '80s, and then even now I'm into modern music, and it took me until, like, the last couple of years to really get into modern music because I was so still, in I hadn't transitioned yet. I was still in the past, I guess, like, just really getting into history and stuff, and it
right,
brought me to, uh appreciating some different artists of today as well. Um, but yeah, like you learn about the different, aspects and influences as well. And then I've always, on top of that, like had a parallel interest in like fashion and the history of fashion and stuff, and learning so much about the not only like the liberation liberations in fashion and such, but learning about um, different drapes of fabric and during different time periods, like how um, you have the bias cut
right,
and how that was invented. And I'm blanking on the woman's name again, but there was a lot of women who like really changed clothing in the early 20th century.
right.
Um, and I was really into that as a kid as well, and when we have, like, reports for school or whatever on history, I would always do, like,
Report on the bias,
some
cut
kind
on
of
the bias. You did a report on the
I
bias.
did a report when I was a kid on, 1920s to
Yeah,
30s transition in fashion because it was it went from a very, modest Victorian, and
right,
then the Edwardian sort of opened up to a little looser, but then you have the 20s where they were just rebelling against the corset and
right,
the bras were not, they wouldn't even have boning in some of the bras. It was just like fabric. And then you have this dresses that were shorter and looser and really, but then it wasn't just the change in, you know, from breaking out from being confined, but you were having experimentation with light and color and drapes of fabric. You had beading, incredible beading that would catch the light, in amazing ways because they would let the fabric drape.
right,
Um, and then into the 30s, you started with new technology and how things were printed. So you went from like embroidery to these floral prints and like the block prints and the change. So you see in like 1930s dresses, which sort of you go from the evolution from 1910s to 20s, and
mhm,
then the 30s sort of borrow from Edwardian cuts a lot,
you
but
do,
then you see a change in color. So
mhm,
they changed because the way you could produce prints and mass produce prints and print them with the new technology is you could have these printed floral dresses, you know, instead of just this plain fabric or maybe some embroidery that you see in the 30s, like printed stuff. So
Yeah.
it really always fascinated me. There's the transitions and how it's almost like an artistic medium change that would happen in clothing as well. And you see also like the corresponding eras in art too, because not even with it wasn't even just the print on the fabrics of the 30s dresses. You were seeing art change, you know, art movements changing in the way that abstract art was being made and such along the same lines of it around the same times. So like history like that, you know, has always been, you know, something that's fascinated me and interests me in seeing and knowing and it's like you can experience it and you can view it, but for me I want to go deep into it and learn about, you know, all of the
So
aspects of
does this picture of Ginger Rogers, is this a sign? Does that mean something to you in terms of the? Does that
I
resonate?
can't really see it. I can see she's wearing a very beautiful dress.
Yeah,
Looks
that's 1937. That's
Yeah, it looks late 30s, early 40s there.
it's earlier.
Looks like she has ruffles on her dress. It's
Yep.
really pretty. But yeah, so I've worked with antique textile dealers as well.
Interesting.
As a result, and it's just interesting because, you know, now I'm able to catch up somewhat with like what do you call it, like modern people's pop culture or whatever people call it,
Contemporary, yeah.
you know, or whatever people are talking about, you know.
Yeah.
It's with the internet, it's gotten a lot easier to sort of keep on top of things, but when I think about a lot of my I guess amongst my peers always growing up, you
Yeah.
know, I would have these interests in things that in either artists or topics that I was really fascinated with and would delve in. And I had a hard, or I guess a difficult time with sort of, what do you call it? Like,
Peer group dynamics, is that the psychology
yeah,
thing?
it's not even dynamic. It's like uh, having the conversations, you know what I mean? Because a lot of people would have this conversation, and it would be sort of the general conversation or consensus of the time, and then I would be like PJ Harvey, you know, and then people would be like Steph's weird, you know what I mean? So
Well,
people
no,
would be like,
can I ask you a question about that? Because PJ Harvey was kind of a big name, wasn't she, in music? Like, wasn't she?
yeah,
Why
I mean,
was
I
there?
feel like she was. By the time that I got to her,
Yeah.
I feel like she was big in the 90s. And
Okay.
then when I got into her, it was like late, I want to say what it was probably like 96, 97.
Yeah.
She had just come out with uh what is that? Is This Desire, that album? That's the album I got into her, but she had uh a lot more, I guess, momentum in the 90s. But, you know, at the time that I had gotten into her, I remember, you know, on like MTV and such, the big artists were like what was going on? Like,
I don't follow popular music very well, so
yeah, it was just like
how
stuff that
you?
I just didn't register with me at all.
Yeah.
Um, and just uh it was just totally different, especially for my age group.
Uh-huh.
Kids were, and I would remember I would call like my friend, and then I would literally just put the phone on like the music I was listening to, and he'd be like,
Oh,
listen to this. And I'd make like little mixed tapes and mixed CDs for
oh, you
people.
did? Yeah.
I don't even know if they listened to them or not, but I was just, that
Oh,
was how I communicated with people.
that's a
And
good way to
then,
communicate. Yeah, it's good.
yeah, and then people will be like, "Did you see this show on TV?" And I'd have no idea that that show even existed.
Right.
So that's kind of
Right.
like where the dynamic is different, I feel like, a lot of
What
times.
are your thoughts about neurodivergence and like the fact that your friend? So I guess so you know for a fact that your friend was neurotypical. Or you at that time?
At this point in my life,
Yeah,
I've come to realize that a lot of my close friends growing up are definitely not neurotypical.
Okay.
They had their own stuff.
Your own stuff.
There's a lot of ADHD friends I had, and definitely I've come to realize I connected with other autistic people because the people I connected with the most were sort of on the same level of where they had a fascination, and then so we would like kind of exchange
Right.
our interests even if they were different, and and it would be the same kind of like it would have a more natural feeling of connection, I guess. Then it's even hard to explain than somebody talking about like some TV show. You know what I mean? It's hard to describe.
Yeah, but on my podcast, I sort of think a TV show, it's all equivalent, right? See, my theory is that everybody makes things.
Yeah.
Things they make are either commercial or not commercial, or they're avant-garde, or they're new, or they're not avant-garde, they're traditional. But to me, it's all artistic expression.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel it's like all valid.
Some people really get into certain TV shows. I'm not saying they're not invalid. Like I'm not saying TV shows or some, but I mean, I'm talking about like a lot of times there's this general consensus of what people are into. Like
it's always what the norm is, or what the
it's just like everybody's watching this show at this time. Everybody's watching the Super Bowl or something, and so that's what people will talk about.
Yeah.
And then, if that's not something that's of interest to me, then it's not something that I'll know or talk about. Sometimes I'll know about it if it's whatever, but for the most part, it's usually something I'm just like, whatever, you know what I mean? Someone be like, did you see such and such? Or there's usually some drama, this actor broke up with da-da-da, like, and everybody's like, oh, I can't believe that. And I'm just like, what? Did you see what happened at the Super Bowl? And I'm just like, so I feel like, I don't know if there's a word for it. It's like there's always that I guess consensus, a mass thing, and sometimes occasionally it'll be something that I get into or know about, but yeah, some of my friends will be into a particular TV show, a type of TV shows, or a certain type of animation or stuff like that. For me, it's not a topic that I really generally focused on.
Yeah.
And but I have autistic friends that get really into certain types of movies or TV shows and stuff like that. And like for me personally, and it's just a personal thing, and it's not like a global neurodivergent thing, I have trouble with movies with a lot of dialogue, or movies that I get hung up sometimes if a movie seems like it's like if there's something in a movie that seems like it wouldn't make sense to me, like I'm like logically or something in the movie, I'll get hung up on it and I won't be able to enjoy the movie. So I enjoy a lot of like abstract film.
Yeah.
Like for a minute I got into like John Whitney type films that were like experiments with like light and film and coloring on film and stuff like that from like the 50s and even the 40s and stuff like that corresponds with a lot of the electronic music experimentation anyway. And I don't know, like I'm synesthetic too, so for me the music for me is a visual experience, and for me it's stimulating enough, where I feel like if I get from the other direction, like visually, it has to like really stimulate me the right way. You know what I mean? And that, maybe it's partly an ADHD thing, like keeping my stimulation and focus in a film. And I really enjoy films that either give me like some kind of thought or whatever. And I really enjoy a lot of times I feel like foreign films, even if I don't understand what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like some of my favorite films. I love The Color of Pomegranates. I don't know if you've ever seen.
That's a great film.
Yeah, I love that film. That's one of my favorites, and I love Daisies.
Daisy's
That's
an extraordinary film. Oh my God.
yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Amazing film.
And
Yeah, that's a whole. No.
and I've seen some French new wave films I really like. I can't remember the name of now. Liquid Sky is a film I really I have the soundtrack to, and reminds me of Daisies in some ways.
There's some similarities, no weird.
Yeah, that I see. I feel like there was like some sort of influence from Daisies in that. But
I used to watch Liquid Sky on VCR.
Wow, yeah.
Because unfortunately I never got to a screening of it. It's like one of the films that didn't. There are certain films that like didn't get distribution very well in certain parts of the country, and Liquid Sky is one of those films that didn't like have a theatrical release, but I don't know. It's weird.
I love that film, but the visuals and the soundtrack and everything and the way it just keeps my attention or whatever, and is abstract enough to keep my attention, but not in a way that makes me be like, this is weird. This is, it has to be abstract enough for me. It's hard to explain what that is, but I don't know. But yeah, like I when I was living in Somerville at one point for a few years, I lived with a couple roommates that were really big. Like they were huge film nerds, like they definitely had to be neurodivergent as well. They were very deep into film. And our living room was just filled with, DVDs and VHS and all stuff of films. And I really would enjoy, watching the films with them. I never got into the collector thing, and it's hard to remember the names of all the films, but they were really into some great films, and they got me in. I remember we went to some screening at, I think it was like the Brattle. They did it was Polish surrealist films.
Yeah.
And they did like 3 films. It was excellent. And I don't remember apparently it was some great Polish surrealist director, but it was so good. So that's the kind of stuff that I like to watch, you know what I mean? I don't know. And I feel like it sounds snobby to say that too, but I'm not a snobby person. I'm not at all. But I feel like.
What do you identify as being snobbish? What is? I mean, I don't know.
I don't even know. It's hard for me to. I feel like people will call you a snob or whatever.
They might.
And I'm just like, what? I feel like it's something people say when they don't understand. When they don't want to understand your point of view or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I really have never considered anyone else a snob in my life that I can think of. That I think of it. I've never been like, that person is a snob. Like, I don't even know like what would be considered.
Well, it has a complex.
The
word has a really complex history in terms of culture and art, and it has different conflicting meanings. And people who it's a whole. That word is a whole universe, and I don't because I don't use. There's a lot of words I don't use not because I don't like the words, but because I think the words are
misused.
But also I think people don't have a settled. So if words don't have a settled definition, I won't use them, even if they're quite popular.
Yeah.
I'm aware that they don't have a settled definition, and there's a lot of words like that. Snob is one of those words. So does snob mean belief in the superiority of a human being?
Yeah.
Like an identity of a human being. In terms of group classification, that's can be an evil. That's really wrong.
Yeah.
It can be really wrong, and that's sometimes what people mean by snob.
Yeah.
And so I guess, that's a snob I would not want to be a part of. Snobbery, but snobbery could also mean that you think that some music is better than other music.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then I'm a complete snob. I think there's always a hierarchy of value. I just do. Some things are better than things, and so which are we talking about?
There's always quality.
There's always quality, but I mean, then again, I'm not I don't
I
think.
wouldn't consider you to be a snob because of that. I would just say that you have a different taste.
Yeah, taste or specific, but I also look. I'm drinking out of a Farrah Fawcett Charlie's Angels cup, coffee cup.
That's
This
awesome.
is a very, but this goes to her foundation for cancer, and so it's a
Oh,
charity
nice.
thing. But I'm a fan. But that's popular entertainment, so I'm not one of these people that's against
Yeah, me
popular
either.
entertainment because I think popular entertainment, there's like anything, there's good popular entertainment, and
I'm
there's
the
not
same
so good
way.
popular.
That's like, when you cook, it's like in general, like if you cook food and
Yeah, I don't know anything about cooking food.
some person could cook something that's totally bland and just
That's
has the ingredients are processed and whatever,
right, right.
and you some people love that.
Yeah, they do.
But
Yeah,
if you have if your palate is that you want something that has flavor
yeah,
and certain ingredients in it,
yeah,
then that's what you want to eat. And then other people are like, ew, that's gross. But then you think what they're eating is just not stimulating your palate enough where you want to eat that. And
right.
maybe it's too stimulating for them to eat what you want to eat. I feel like it's that with art and music.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah,
It's almost like a stimulation thing,
it's all stimulation because it all has to do with the senses.
Yeah.
But there's another. The senses could be physical, but the senses could also be spiritual and metaphysical. So
I agree with that.
I do think there's a spiritual dimension to things.
I definitely agree with
Yeah,
that.
and so it gets very complicated. But I think if you can analyze things too much,
You
I think
definitely
sometimes it's important just to enjoy the stimulation.
Yes.
Just to have your internal clock. Is this set right with me or not?
Yeah. For me, I don't really think about it too much, and
Yep.
I know when I like something and I know when it's not hitting me right. It's an immediate response.
Right.
Where I feel like no or yes, and
Right.
it's very rare that I have an in between where I'm like I'm not sure if I like it or not. I'm very and I feel like when I'm thinking about that I am very immediate with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I notice sometimes that, if I'm amongst people and other people will get frustrated with me, I'm just like yes or no, because I just kind of know, and it'll take them a minute to catch up because they'll have to, figure it out. That's a thing, for me.
Yeah, I'm really weird because I'll do a lot of things for other people that I often don't like. And I don't mind doing it if it makes them happy, because I can see their happiness, and that confuses people. And sometimes people get the wrong idea. They actually think I like the thing. And it's almost like they accuse me of being dishonest. Like, you mean you're not really into that? It's because I can imagine if stuff I'm into, so it could go both ways. And so I've been, I don't know if you're the opposite than that, and you never do that, or you've gotten.
I used to, when I was younger, be a bigger, I think it's called fawning.
I don't know.
Where I would, kind of, what do you call it? Entertain someone else's interest in something, or entertain a situation, or accompany somebody to something that I wouldn't necessarily. And to an extent, depending on the person now, because I feel like I've grown and set boundaries and learned, it took a lot to do. And I feel like as a person on that sort of thing, and it's not good or bad to do that, but I feel like I have a battery and an internal need to
you don't want to run the battery.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a lot more I'm a lot more how do you describe it? I can actually I wouldn't do this in the past, but I can just be like, I
Lisa
want to do that or something.
Barrett, this great book on emotions. She calls it a body budget. You're talking about everybody has a body budget, and
that's interesting. I like how that's a body budget.
Well, that's her place for it. She says a lot. 90% of human life is dysregulation of body budgets. So she connects body budget problems with oppression and poverty and very serious things, or body budget problems, that people are stressed because our society, as she said, our society is engineered to deplete people.
Yeah, it
Almost
really
like
is.
trying to deplete people's batteries and make
It's
people
really
run dead.
difficult.
That's
Like I have fibromyalgia, so
oh wow.
like my battery has like it's almost like when you get a weak battery and you have to charge it more often.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I feel like now. It's really difficult to deal with because it's something that I have that exists. I can't turn it on or off, and I feel like I've lived with it for a long time and ignored it. But now it's hard to ignore because it's physically disables me. Um, and I don't know. I feel like it's not just nurture. There's some nature to it as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a neurology to it. Um, and it's hard to really say if. I mean, I've had to really struggle throughout my life and have had difficult childhood. I have had, you know, I'm poor and
Yeah.
I have to work and
Right.
you know, you know, and then I'm technically a disabled person at the same time. Um, so for me, I've worn down. So I think I'm forced to kind of have to have these boundaries that I didn't have in the past too, where I have to, what do you call it? Designate my energy and time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I feel like,
Well, I hope being a guest on a show doesn't. I hope it helps.
oh no.
I hope this helps. It doesn't. I don't want to. You know,
I
again, if
would tell you, I would be like, nope. You
although
know,
if you don't mind, I do want to discuss your store at some point because it's
oh
important.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, whenever you feel it's time to discuss that or what that is, or
Oh yeah. So I ramble a lot. So I hope this
that's fine.
I hope this show hasn't been so incoherent and like
No, it's coherence.
with me trying to find what words I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I trip up a lot when I talk, so I talk in circles. So
Mhm.
because it's hard. I can visualize a lot of the things I'm trying to say, but then the visual's there and then the word is not. I'm like, what word?
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, I started a store. I'm wearing a shirt from it that's on it.
Can I ask you an honest question?
Yeah.
Is your store inspired by Zoe Lund in Ms. 45?
No,
Ms.
what's that?
45. It's an Abel Ferrara film from 1981. I thought it was a homage to her.
It's
Um,
actually
you know what I mean? Because it's Messier 45. Like Ms. If you've seen Ms. 45, right, the crime film about the
I have not seen that, so I'll have to
film from
look into that.
1981 about a mute woman, and she was 17 years old when she did this film. She's very famous as the screenwriter to Bad Lieutenant.
So it's called Miss
It's
45?
called Ms. 45, and it's a rape revenge film.
Interesting.
And it's about a woman
Sort
who
of like Liquid Sky.
much better film than Liquid Sky. Blows. It's
Okay.
an incredible
I'll
film.
have
But
to check it out.
basically, it's her shooting all these men throughout the film, but it's very much an art film, and she works in a fashion, and she's mute, and she's sort of a little bit neurodivergent. There's no lines in the film, and it's her basically her revenge. But I thought, you know, it's so similar to the title of your shop. I thought it was an homage. But anyhow, the screenwriter, her name, she had different names. Zoe Lund. She wrote a lot for Abel Ferrara. She wrote Bad Lieutenant, which is
Her
interesting.
name rings a bell.
Yeah, because she was a very unusual. She was a poet, filmmaker, producer. She was also quite radical. She was like pro heroin. So she was not. She was somebody that was a lifelong user of heroin and wrote and was a. I guess if she lived and not died young, she'd probably be a what would the term be? She would be a harm reduction activist probably now. But so yeah, so she was an interesting person, controversial, but brilliant mind. But I talked too much long about her, but Messier 45 made me think of that.
Yeah, Messier
45, it's like
45 is Charles Messier or Messier.
ah,
He named star clusters and he
okay.
numbered them. And 45 is Pleiades, which I have a fascination with, not only just the cosmological aspects of those stars, but
Huh.
I did the history of all the mythology and even the current mythologies around Pleiades is very interesting to me because I'm also a very spiritual person and I connect psychically into different realms myself. And I even the mythology to me has depth to it, that very subtle depth that has meaning in the archetypes and stuff like that. And I really, I don't want to use, it's not identify is not the word, but I like a lot of the literature and the people channeling Pleiades and, you know, what's considered to be a consciousness of light from Pleiades. Like I keep getting, just naturally stumbling upon that material, and the material itself, like if you go into, what is her name, Barbara.
I don't know about these.
Her first name begins with it. It's like starts with M. But she channeled it. She was a channel for Pleiadians in the early 90s, and I stumbled on her books earlier last year, and I read them just, you know, start to finish nonstop. And they're, you know, if you get past the fact that she's talking about she's channeling Pleiadians, a consciousness, the overall message of like what she is saying was so relevant to like now.
Oh, interesting.
As far as like humans and even this current climate, her channels in like 1991 when I was reading them was just like, I was like, you said this now. And it's really interesting because it was a psychic channel, and psychic channels.
She predict fashion coming to the U.S. like 20 years ahead of that.
She did. It wasn't fashion. It was sort of like consciousness and how humans are interacting and what's happening globally as far as what do you call it? Socially and economically and things like that. And just sort of what's going on in general. And it's timeless in how it's delivered, but also not. And it was just very, it's a work of art in itself, I guess. It's the Bringers of the Dawn, I think was the first one I read. Was that one? Yeah. And then there's Family of Light. And so the Pleiadian she channels are called the Family of Light. And just reading it and what they have to say or what she has to say is very beautiful. And so I got into the, you know, the history of Pleiades and the, you know, and even in native cultures, they've believed in a very similar, you could call it extraterrestrial or whatever, but it's sort of like it's a consciousness that comes from the elemental delivery of light through certain subatomic situations and how light travels and such. Like for me, it's phosphorus and where phosphorus lands and where it has a heavy density. I believe all all elemental, I guess atoms or subatomic light. Each of the different interactions or what would you call it? Elements, the different elements of light. They each have a resonance and that sort of corresponds with like you could say archetypical resonance that it travels through, and it has a consciousness where it can not only deliver information, but it holds information, sort of like how your DNA does. And phosphorus is also part of our DNA. And for me, I have like a resonance where I understand the dynamic of phosphorus. And for me, her channels with the Pleiadian and, you know, consciousness of light that she's channeling is very similar to what I feel with phosphorus and how I guess you say I can say channeled. I've had channels of phosphorus that have been very similar, but that's a whole other story that we could go on for days.
I mean, I don't know if you know, I'm very open to such things, and I'm, you know, I don't. I am in no way a materialist.
Yeah, so that's why.
Only a spiritualist. I think the world is alive. The
Me
cosmos
too.
is alive. I think consciousness survives bodily death.
Yes.
And I think
Same here.
consciousness.
Like, I just think I'm a form. I'm animating spiritual
Absolutely.
matter,
Absolutely.
and
It's beautiful to
I
hear you
don't
talk.
believe that. Yeah, I don't believe that I'm just contained within
Nope.
this, or that this is somehow better than other consciousness or
That's
whatever. There's just a certain. This is a certain density, or a collection of so many different things, and light is one of them. And
Mhm.
light is so interesting how it communicates, it travels, and different elements of light
Yeah.
have uh, information, and I guess I could have a whole talk on that. So I'm
Yeah,
just
well,
trying to
you
like
can't say it
keep it
right
to
now.
a thing.
I
But
thought,
anyway,
I thought we would talk about chakra deals and instead, but I didn't. I guess at all because you have the chakra.
yeah. So
But
we could go. That's a whole
I'm
thing. I
honored.
could. Yeah, I don't know how long this is going to be, so I don't know how long I should talk about that. But anyway, so the Messier
Let's give it
45,
30 minutes.
huh?
Let's give
Another
it a
30
half
minutes,
hour.
another half an hour. Okay.
Do it.
So yeah, so we went from the name of my shop to what it's about. So
What about it?
you know, uh, if we want to talk about that stuff and get really like esoteric, which I love to do,
I do too.
for me, I have had these, I don't know what, they're not experiences, but I can visualize, I guess what people would call channels. Like
Channels.
I started listening, I guess
Mhm.
you could say, and interpreting. It's not really I was getting messages, I wasn't hearing voices. I was
Mhm.
interpreting like the earth, and I started to hear about, and at first I couldn't really like verbalize what it was saying. I was just visualizing it, and I could visualize the plasma core of the earth, and it had this consciousness, and it was delivering this message of the resonance of the magnetic waves
Mhm.
and the interaction between phosphorus and iron, and the interesting makeup of a plasma, of iron plasma, and how we contain the iron plasma. And it was almost like I had tapped into some sort of resonance within myself, but that is not just contained with me. It was like I wouldn't say speaking, I was just listening to
Yeah.
the earth. And it was,
Right.
I was getting all of, I wouldn't say, it's hard to say
Getting
that
it.
they're messages. It's almost like,
Yeah.
and when I would get the information, I would look it up because I would try to interpret the
Mhm.
visualizations I was getting, and it would all be scientifically accurate as to what, you know, they
Yeah.
believe is in the core of the earth, and how it interacts, and how the electromagnetic field is.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would get really into these scientific articles of it, but
Mhm.
I didn't get into the scientific information and then get into the information I was listening to. I would listen and get the information, and then it would be validated by science. So it
Okay.
was very interesting because it wasn't information that was incorrect or a delusion.
Oh
I
yeah.
was listening to information that was like accurately describing the center of the earth and how it interacts.
Right. Oh wow.
And so I just got, I just,
So does that mean that you're in? I guess you're interested in geology too. I mean, these are. You talk about the center of the earth. I mean,
yeah, I guess so.
so
Um,
what does it? How do you think this information relates to how you see the arts and autism? What do you
it's
think
hard
about
to describe.
the
'Cause for
place
me,
that
I don't like, think about it like that. These are things that, this is kind of like, me as a person, and yes, I'm an
right,
autistic person and an artist.
right,
And so I do, but when I look at, like, when we were talking about the drawing my mother has, and at that point, I hadn't really, um, understood the Victorian era or the clothing, but the people that I drew were wearing very period, like Victorian era clothing,
mhm,
and I don't know where I got that from, or
okay,
like why I was
right,
drawing that.
yeah,
So, and I wasn't at the time when I'm a 10-year-old, of course I'm not dissecting it or anything. I'm just drawing something.
sure,
Um so I don't know, but I it must I'm very sensitive to my environment, and I guess what you would call vibrations or whatever. I have a very extreme sensitivity, which probably contributes to
Right.
fibromyalgia.
Okay.
And it's, not only a sensory thing, but it's an intuitive thing
Right.
where I believe I guess resonance and vibration or whatever you want to call it. Like I feel like the word vibration is used so much without people really
Knowing what it is.
understanding it, and that I even don't know if I want to use that word.
Right.
And I feel like resonance is a better word, but it still is kind of hard to like.
Not even that's better, but it's not quite it.
Yeah, and there's, I wouldn't say it's almost it's there is a um it has consciousness where
Mhm.
if you are sensitive to that, I guess, channel or or wavelength, or the deconstruction of a wavelength, because a wavelength is large, but
Mhm.
there's smaller situations within that wavelength. If you're sensitive to that information, and then throughout your life you are sensitive, you are exposed to that particular, it's almost like you notice a pattern of that
Yeah.
frequency or whatever, where
Right.
you start to interpret it, and I believe it can be interpreted, and it's difficult to decipher in a communication sensory sort of way.
Right.
And for me, when I pick up on information, I can visualize it, like I can see it. I can
You
see
see that. Yeah.
what I'm picking up on.
Right.
And when I think about stars or planets or the elements that make up the universe, or whatever, I can like visualize the interactions, and I can see it before I can interpret it or apply it to words or speech. And I was visualizing these interactions and visualizing um, like these interpretations. And I notice a lot in like ancient mythology and stuff too, that these archetypes that are applied to certain elements, I don't feel like it's a mistake sometimes, because it will have the same resonance as that actual thing that they're talking about. You know what I mean? You can give it a name. Like you can give the element phosphorus a name. You can give it an archetype. You
Mhm.
can give it, many different things. But it's a subatomic element,
Yeah.
and subatomic elements to me have like an extreme amount of density and an extreme amount of information.
Mhm.
Like, I guess within our dimension, they're subatomic and they're tiny, and that's only because from our perspective they are, and what we can see them as.
Right.
But actually, they're giant. They're huge.
Really huge.
As far as like their interactions with where they exist within, and the different patterns in which they correlate. Because within us, we have you know elements like iron and phosphorus within certain um, states, and within certain chemical compositions, elemental compositions,
Mhm.
atomic compositions, where they're interacting in a certain, it's almost like they're woven in a certain way. But when you break them down as to how they're interacting, that pattern repeats at different scales. And it has we're not interacting and functioning with this free will and consciousness and ability to
No.
communicate with
No.
one another with language
No. Yeah.
just because we are able to.
Right. Right.
um, we are doing so within our perspective
How
of
we're
that,
able to do.
to interact in this certain way, and it's not greater than or less than
It's
anything. It's just,
is what
yeah,
it is.
it's just within a certain composition of it, where this is how we interact as that, and many different things. And those particles, that's a word, those particles.
Right. That's the word. Right.
Yeah, those particles.
Yeah.
They have
Particles.
I guess I feel like I'm using the word consciousness, but they have informational storage. They have data. They have, they're what you call fractal, fractal antenna.
Right.
They deliver and receive information, much like a radio or whatever.
Radio device.
And
hey, Stephanie,
they're not man-made.
I got to interview Rupert Sheldrake in the 80s.
I don't know who that is, but
he's the guy that invented the concept of morphic resonance.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, he wrote a really beautiful book called A New Science of Life, Theory of Morphic Resonance. And somebody asked him what the brain or mind was, and he says it's kind of like a radio. He says he likened the brain to it's what you're saying just now, the radio or the antenna.
Yeah, and like I can see the interaction when I think about it, and the interaction. And one day I was having a thought about, I think a lot about like the reason for and the need for like black holes, like, and why we can't, like, people are like, why can't we see this black hole and exist? And for me, a black hole, when you look at a black hole, you're looking at like you're a part of you're looking at yourself. Like light is looking at itself, and light cannot look at itself. So you're it's like, it's hard to describe how it is, but it's there to hold us. It's almost like what you would call sort of like a hologram, where the black hole is projecting us and at the same time it contains us. So when we think about like DNA and how if you extracted all of the information that's within, your personal genetic DNA, and then they have all of this junk DNA or whatever, and how you can extract it, and it would be so much information and material that would just go beyond even the mass of the earth. But you can't see it.
It's not visual. Yeah, well,
and that's what a black hole is too.
My feeling about it is that we're not supposed to see the hole.
Exactly.
Why would you?
And it's not really a hole. Or
what I mean is, we just want to do our part. I don't want to do more than I can do. I'm very practical. I just want to do all that I can do, but I don't want to click on any more. Is that right? It's the right. It has to be the right amount. Is that kind of what you're? Yeah, it's just Feel about it. Yeah. Exactly.
For me, when I think about it, it's just because it just comes in. It's just something that comes into my mind. You could say that I'm interested in all of, these things, but I'm just to naturally think about them. They visually, I have visualizations of how these interactions are having, and it's an intuitive interaction I'm having, I feel like, and it's hard to describe outside of myself. But I feel like as I'm very I have a very, it's not imagination, it's just like I pick up sensory stuff and resonance and whatever you want to call it, in a very visual way.
I want to send you this Rupert Sheldrake, because I think he wrote a beautiful book, and I wonder if it relates to what you're talking about.
It probably does, and I feel like I've heard that name before as well. Yeah, like I'm not, like I feel like I'm sort of an intellectual, but also sort of not. I don't really know. Like
because the intellect is not sufficient, right? It's not everything.
Yeah.
You can only be partly intellectual. But what about the part of life that's not intellectual, right?
Yeah,
right? It's
I'm very autonomic. I'm very like autonomous as far as how I think about things.
Sure.
In the, when I'm ready to pick up on information, I do. And then I should talk about this book that I've barely made a dent into it because it's so dense of material. I don't know if you've ever.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that. The tarot. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's not about the tarot.
Oh, it's not about.
It's about.
Yeah,
It goes deep into the occult and esoteric history, and even math. It gets really intense into. And if you understand the meaning behind like the words and things that they are saying, it is a metaphysical
dimension
book. And then for me,
I wanted to ask you about this emotions book because Lisa Barrett, her big revolutionary discovery is that not only are emotions not universal, there's no emotion that every human being, every society has. That means some societies that people actually don't even have or experience the emotions, other people do. But that it's something that's very constructed over time. What do you think of her thesis or
when I think about that,
autistic people or autism?
Yeah, it's like almost like emotions being a form of social communication.
Right.
I believe that there is like there are sensory octaves that can be related to different emotions. Like there's an octave for, I disagree with this.
Right.
There's an octave for, this hurts. There's an octave for, I'm sad, or whatever you want to call it. I guess it would be in the same with hurt. There's like an octave for like joy, an octave for connection.
Yeah.
And we can apply words to those octaves. We can also apply sounds to them, and we can apply visualizations. And even those sounds and visualizations, maybe they can activate an octave within certain people, but maybe some people have shorter or greater resonances within those octaves. Say, the capacity to feel the resonance of that octave may be shorter or larger among different people. So they may have a different spectrum of how they perceive and communicate those particular emotions or octaves. Is octave even the word to use that?
I don't know.
Does that word even make sense there? I don't even know.
The only reason why I brought up that subject, I brought up the subject because there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of literature about what is an emotion and what do people feel. I have a lot of feelings, and I know that you do, right? But people say a lot of bullshit or a lot of nonsense about the emotions, right? Or what's a right emotion or a wrong emotion. I'm sure you have feelings about that. Yeah,
I do have feelings about that.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because one of my friends, I was working with her in her antique textiles studio actually one day, and she played a lot of like Dharma talks, Buddhist Dharma or whatever, and we were listening to one, and it talked about our particular societies, how there are emotions, I guess, or feelings that are dismissed and punished, and the harm that it causes when you don't know how to process or what do you call acknowledge, accept, and validate those emotions properly, because you are learned to not only dismiss them but view them as not being correct, not forced to not have them, and how that creates a lot of that can cause people to have addictions and
Yeah.
behaviors and responses to
Yeah.
not having the right nurturing of
Mhm.
processing those emotions, which are just as valid as what we
There's other emotions.
consider the positive
Right.
emotions, you know, and so classifying a feeling into
Mhm.
good or a bad feeling when it's just a feeling or a response to a situation that's valid. If you're perceiving a situation and your physical response to that situation is it's an autonomic response. So if you're having an autonomic response to your perception of a situation, that's always going to be valid because it exists and it's real. And
Mhm.
it's just a matter of um, the dynamic of how that communication occurs instead of dismissing somebody for being upset about something that's making them upset and be like, no, you know, um, helping them to process, okay, this is making you feel upset, you know, it's grounding that emotion and
Yeah.
holding that emotion and validating it and accepting that that makes you upset. It's okay to be upset by whatever is making you upset.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And then placing that boundary, you know, and
Yeah.
with that. And yeah, I like for me that is something that I have thought about a lot. And
Wow.
because I feel like that's very deep in how a lot of our culture has processed like their trauma. It causes trauma.
Yeah. Or it causes trauma.
Yeah, and it
So,
causes
you,
it.
so you're saying trauma could be caused by the rejection of emotion itself, a certain emotion,
To me,
or
that's a part of that's a very for me it's it's a construction of trauma too.
oh, interesting.
I guess it's hard for me to describe, but
Yeah.
that particular element of nurturing or not nurturing, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
is very deep within how um, I would say like the commercialization of people are taken advantage of basically
Oh,
by our system
yeah.
and what they're sold, not only products they're sold, but ways of life they're sold,
Hmm.
how you know, ways of conduct they're sold,
Right.
um, social rewards and such are
Right.
sold to people that a lot of them aren't, they're just made up, you know what I mean? But a lot of them prey upon you. Um, it's like the good or bad, the reward or not. So it
Hmm.
preys upon
Reward or punishment.
reward or punishment.
Right.
And for me, the nurturing of that particular thing happens with being like, it's bad for you to dislike this and to have that emotion of dislike or whatever. And you cannot express that. And because you feel that way, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And for me, that goes deep into the psyche of how people are, how people buy into a lot of
Right.
stuff in our society that is very, um,
Mm.
you know, it's not logical. It's not empathetic. It's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't foster growth
Yeah.
of the human being, of the human psyche, of of culture, of art. You know, we're going into a point where it's getting so deep where the appreciation of, you know, creating and culture and difference and shifting paradigms through art, shifting paradigms through fashion, shifting
Yeah.
paradigms for music, and just totally deconstructing things and moving things forward in a totally different perspective is becoming hindered
Hmm.
by, I guess it could be like a conformity of right and wrong now. There's a lot of it's like a subtle like funnel from, I guess if you know history, there's a lot of changes and expression and things going way outside the box. And for me, when you go back to the stimulation thing, a lot of our modern commercial culture and culture in general is, well, in this Western culture we exist in, I wouldn't say I wouldn't go as far as to generalize the say the whole world, but the culture in what we are in doesn't really foster. It's coming to a point where in all facets of institutions and what do you call it, social reward and
punishment again.
And
some people say carrot and stick, or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a social contract. That is developed in society that it says that having a different perspective or thinking outside of particular boxes is bad. Like, say if I don't conform to A or B, I have to be either A or B.
Or A or B, that's it.
Democrat or Republican, I have to be da da da. And if I have
thought, 0 or 1.
Yeah.
0 or 1, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'm outside of those boxes. Like for me, this one and then this one is, and I'll voice my opinion and I'll articulate it. I've written like essays on it, and then I get people like very angrily, just very mad at me for not conforming to one or the other, and accusing me of, like, basically accusing me of holding them back somehow by not being a Democrat. For me, I just feel like as a human being who wishes that all human beings can thrive, I wish to have a different system, whether or not that seems like an idealist point of view or not, or whatever. For me, I feel like that's not bad to have thought and to want more than what is offered in it. For me, if I feel like my point of view is for humanity, as a humanitarian, to progress.
The really weird thing that I think probably the hardest thing is that it's totally doable.
Yeah.
That's what really, the thing that makes me angry is people say you can't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
And all the things they say that you can't do are the things you could do.
Exactly. They just believe they can't. They've been it's a conditioning. They're like, you can't do that. I'm like, if we all did it, if we all did what we really wanted to do, we could do it.
Yeah.
Like, if you just do what you want to do, and we all did that, nobody could tell us no.
Right. Wow.
If you want to tell me no,
that's
and
fine.
hinder my growth, why would you want to do that? I don't want to do that to you. That's fine. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's just that shifts for me. It stems from that sort of conditioning. Of the feelings and emotions. I probably went on a weird ass tangent. I'm sorry.
No.
And I keep interrupting you too. I'm so sorry.
No, you didn't interrupt at all, I don't think.
Yeah. Sometimes I get excited.
So what I said we have a half hour. Was that? I don't even think we reached the half hour.
Okay.
Time, I think.
So we can talk about my store. So I just created this website because I create websites for a lot of people when they're stores or whatever.
Okay.
So for now, I'm just sort of like importing goods that I feel are high quality because I have a very good understanding of what is and what isn't. And for right now, it's like stuff from China, which is like whatever. But I don't wish to continue doing that forever. I want to just see if I can create a profit to start my own line. So right now I'm just curating stuff that goes with sort of my vision.
Right.
And so far I haven't had a whole lot of time to devote to it, but I hope to integrate it with Etsy. And I'm trying to keep it like affordable
Right.
and have like sort of a concept. I have a lot of fun sweaters like this one,
That's beautiful.
and a lot of like vegan leather stuff that I feel is like good for winter. It's just sort of creating like a style.
Stephanie, can I ask you about this necklace? Because that's important too, I think. It's really symbolic.
Oh, this necklace.
That's incredible.
I collect a lot of like I guess you would say, I hate the word ethnic. I just feel like it's called, I collect a lot of different cultural stuff that I really love. The create, the artisanal stuff. This is a
Right.
Kenyan necklace, a beaded Kenyan necklace. I found it.
It's from Kenya. Okay.
I bought it from like a vendor, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's wood and beads.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because I have fabric. The name of the tribe is escaping me, but it's Dutch wax
Okay.
material, and
I
it's
forgot to ask you an important question when we were talking about fashion. I don't know why it escaped me, but I want to ask you what your favorite dress silhouette is of all the different decades. Do you have a particular era where you're like, that's the best? Or do you like more? Is that understand that question? I mean, what do you?
For me, it's I feel like at this point, the best. I don't know what the best would be. I've always really, really loved the tailoring of pieces around the I guess late Edwardian to early 20s.
Okay.
A friend of mine will stumble upon these and sell them. Carolyn Forbes Textiles, who I work with sometimes, she finds these pieces that have this imaginative way that they drape and are made. Like she had this velvet one, handmade, hand sewn. It had just the cuffs were just like the cuffs, and then the sleeve was like open, almost like a kimono, and it was purple velvet, like the soft. It was like definitely silk, like lined in like a very thin silk, and it had just like the pleats just all hand pleated and just draped perfectly with the balloon, and then it had a random kimono sleeve, so it just incorporated all of these different elements and had that art deco feel to it, and just the stunning parts about it were just the attention to the detail of how it was stitched and laid on in the body, and how it draped. And I feel that that particular period, the pieces, and I don't even have a particular designer I would say is my favorite from the area. I just feel like the particular cultural, what do you call it?
Milieu.
Yeah, just sort of cross-cultural stuff that was happening, along with just this new attention to detail that had a lot of freedom, and it wasn't chained to a certain. Yeah, because when you look at like, if you look at like well, even like Civil War period.
I frankly don't like. Are you talking about 1860s, 1860s?
Yeah, like if you look at the.
I do not like it. I do not like it. Yeah, some people like it.
That were like confused. They were like very, but it was all the same, and it was like a certain aesthetic.
It's too heavy.
Yeah, and it was like yeah, exactly. Conform.
And it also does. It's also not flattering.
No,
I think it was designed to be unflattering.
Yeah, it was
like a whole mindset. It was like, I don't know. It's a whole. I mean.
Yeah, it was like intense and had a lot of like cultural dynamic to it, but it didn't allow for an artistic
No.
freedom beyond the form and stuff. Like there was a lot of it, this was the aesthetic and this is how.
But what is it? What is it about the Edwardian? Something opened up that period. It's interesting, right? It's sort of like something happened, right?
There's like the women's suffrage
Yes.
and communism.
Early, but
The,
but the good communists, right? The council
yeah.
communists,
Like
right?
the people who founded the Republican
council.
Party were communists. People don't realize that the Republican Party was started by communists.
It was when it was good. Yeah.
So
Good.
they would be very surprised to hear that
what happened to their party.
That they were communists at first.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that sort of.
Have you read Karl Marx's letter to New York Herald Tribune about Lincoln praising?
I haven't read that letter.
It's beautiful. Karl Marx wrote about praising the North and a possibility of progress for the northern side and praising Lincoln.
Interesting. Yeah, like I've delved into that history a little bit, but not too specifically. And I've read Marx. I've read I love Frederick his writings.
I like Engels more, actually.
Me too.
That's interesting. Why?
Yes. The origin of the family and the state. That's one of my favorites. And it's inspired by the Native American cultures. So that history is very interesting to me. But there was like a new thought movement, and even in art, art was changing into this, abstract. Like there was a new era of thought, a paradigm shift, I guess.
Yes, a paradigm shift, yeah.
And it sort of just, because it was so new, it just sort of like had this explosion everywhere.
Yep.
It's like this shared explosion, and then there was a sudden bang around like
when it fell apart.
With a lot of bombs too. And
there was that beautiful period, right, where you had Debussy and Ravel, right, in music. Debussy and Ravel, it's the same, the Impressionists, and it's amazing.
Yeah, you're more into like the music side of that era, which is very interesting. I feel like I should dive into that because
somebody wants to talk to you.
I'm on a podcast, Mom. Like that.
You want your mom to become part of the stream?
I know, right?
Say hi.
Yeah, but we're like talking forever.
Do you have dinner time? Do you have to go to dinner?
No, she probably wanted to ask me something. It's fine.
Okay. I don't know what the rules are. I'm new to live streaming, so I don't know what
I don't know how long it should go. I could ramble forever. I don't even know where I began, and I went to somewhere else. So
yeah, it's beautiful. But can I thank you for your generosity in talking about these spiritual matters? Because I feel like a lot of people are afraid to go there, and they're kind of also a lot of people are very dismissive of those kinds of things. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And I want you to know that on my show, I'm totally welcome all that.
Yeah,
and I don't have any patience for people that dismiss that or make fun of that. It's very, as you can see, I'm getting teary because I feel really strongly about that. And
I really appreciate you having me talk on your show.
I didn't know we were going to get into those things, but it just happened. But
yeah,
I
appreciate you and letting me talk too, and understanding what I'm saying, because I can ramble as well. But those are things that I'm definitely open to, and I'm always open to talking more about them on your show too, and specifically because I can just go on in so many tangents. So how many different things have we talked about today? So
you're gonna check out Ms. 45, or have you heard of it? I'm sure you've heard of the movie Bad Lieutenant and this kind of thing.
I'm sure if I saw like the covers of or like the posters, I would be like, oh yeah. But that's one, Ms. 45.
And Rupert Sheldrake.
Yes.
Rupert Sheldrake.
Rupert Sheldrake. Someone else told me about Rupert Sheldrake too at one point. That's a name. Somebody wrote it down, put it on a paper, and gave it to me. And I never looked into it. Now that you say it again, now I have to get into Rupert Sheldrake. that's something I
Well,
have.
Rupert Sheldrake started off as a very traditional English botanist and studying plants, but he started doing experiments of dogs. He wrote a book about how dogs know when their masters are coming home, quote unquote, or when they're.
Oh yeah, they know.
They know, but he actually wrote a book on the spirituality and science of that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, he's beautiful, and he's very. But his phrase is morphic resonance.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that he thinks we're like tuning forks. He says a human being is a tuning fork, like a musical tuning fork. I thought, well, that's
that's exactly what I was saying.
Oh, that's interesting.
In a different word.
Yeah.
And I agree. That's interesting to say that, because the two people I lived with that were really into movies, one of them had a dog named Lucy that I adored. I connected with her very well. But her owner, he worked, and I would get home from work before him, and I'd be there with the dog. And I want to say like 20 minutes before he would get home,
Mm-hmm.
he would walk from the bus, which was like way down the street. And it's almost like she knew when he got off the bus or something, because it was like a 20-minute walk. But it was about 20 minutes from the time he got home. She would like know, and it would be way before he was even close, but I would know when he was 20 minutes away, basically, because Lucy would be like ready. She would like get up and like be waiting at the door, knowing that he was about to be home. So she had this very intense.
It's
She understood his resonance from that far away, which is for me, it's an infinite resonance. And then, like you said, like a tuning fork. It's about how far or how great or whatever you see that resonance. It's not big or small. It's like a dimensional perception, I guess. But so
how are we going to create our intentional community? Remember, I talked about my dream of having like a kind of I don't know, how are we going to do this? We're all far away from each other. Create an artistic community of some kind.
I know that's something I would love.
Yeah,
I think about because Van Gogh was my favorite artist as a kid. That was one of my first interests when I was about like.
You mentioned that in our previous.
Yeah.
So and you and I have the same politics, right? We're both anarchists, right? We're both anti-capitalist. And
we're both socialist. Anarchist, socialist sort of viewpoint.
Yeah.
For sure. For me, for me, it's not even really an ideology or for me, it's just nature. This is how humans. That's how we are. That's just how we grow and exist. And then all of these other constructs like capitalism are constructs that confine us.
Yeah.
Into social conduct or social contract or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm not against contracts per se, but I think the question about a contract is who does it serve? Who
exactly.
Who writes it? That's the trick of that. It is a contract is
when a contract says that something natural and harmless is bad, then
that's a
or punishes certain things that are normal, well, at least to me normal, or says certain things are weird that are not weird, then I don't agree with it. But or just banishes people to having tiers of wealth or poverty based upon this construct of money. It's just it's like so intricately and deeply constructed into psychological conditioning as well.
Stephanie, is there anything as we come towards all good things come to an end? Even good things have to end. So this has to end. But is there anything you want to say in closing about anything? I know your mom knocked at the door, and it's probably different where you are, and I have like to.
Yeah, I guess.
Is there anything you want to say about anything?
I guess what should I say to wrap that up? But anyway, so hopefully at some point in the future we can dream about a artistic community or commune. And I was mentioning Van Gogh because he lived in this house, and artist house in France at one point, and I always dream of stuff like that, of just having a weird thing like that. That's what I visualize. But yeah, so I also have the website shopmessier45.com. And yeah, I put a bunch of stuff on sale today. So there's a lot of stuff on sale. And I'm working on a painting very slowly.
Good.
So hopefully by next year I'll have a new painting up. It's a very slow process of painting. And oils and mica glitter. And that's all I'm working on now. I don't know what else to say about myself or anything else. I enjoyed the discussion, and thank you so much. I appreciate you for letting me talk.
Yeah. I wish we could go on forever, but we can't. But
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for getting into some of these so-called mystical things.
Yes, thank you.
People call it mystical to put it in a closet or in a ghetto.
I would love to do.
Yeah.
I would love. I've talked so much, so I'm losing my voice.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's the time to close then. So I guess in closing, it would be nice to do, at some point we could do maybe we can do a focused discussion on that's not, instead of open-ended, we're kind of went everywhere. Maybe we could do a focused discussion. I could prepare a little bit more.
Well, yeah.
And how we can talk about that stuff, because I would love to talk about it more, myself, and I have friends that tell me I should do YouTube videos of it when I talk to them about it. And I haven't really talked about it too much because of that, because it's so esoteric. So it would be wonderful, whenever we could have another discussion at some point in the future, focused on that, if you'd like.
Can we post this after it's recorded so people that weren't able to be here can watch it?
Absolutely, that would be great. Yes.
Let's do a little promotion. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
Self-promotion. If what we're promoting has value, then there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
And
I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I think it's a significant video.
Thank you so much.
I hope we can get you the music I did at the beginning. You weren't here. You want to go back and.
Absolutely, yes. I will watch it and enjoy that music, because I know that you're a brilliant musician and composer. So that's it.
Well,
thank you for having me here.
And have a good weekend. And
yes, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, bye.